the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. My guest today is Phumlani Msomi from South Africa. He is a chemistry lecturer and a researcher at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. He believes that as Africans, we need to work on technologies and make Africa an industrial place to solve the problems faced by the people who live on the continent. He is currently working on developing new types of power sources that are cleaner and more environmentally friendly. In this episode, Phumlani explains his research in which the use of power sources such as fuel cells, flow batteries, and ethanol batteries are used as an alternative to the normal lithium batteries that are currently on the market. The aim, therefore, is to provide people in the rural areas of South Africa to energy to self-sustain. Sounds like a plan, right? Well, you have to tune in to hear more about this and about his upbringing and the roots of his science. Do stay tuned. Hi, Phumlani.
Hello, Annie. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, great. So we're just going to get started. So for everybody out there, could you just introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself, where you're from, your age, where you're currently based, and what you do.
Well, as you've mentioned, my name is Phumlani Msomi. I'll be turning 31 this month of May. I'm from here in South Africa. Was raised in Durban in a place called Lamontville. I come from a family of 7, and I'm the oldest. I'm currently based in Johannesburg now. I'm staying in Boksburg, but I'm a researcher and a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction. So as what I usually like to do, just to get a little bit more insight about yourself before we dive into the full interview, I just wanted to find out, here in South Africa, for those that don't know, we recently had a lockdown and we were not allowed to get takeouts. So recently the restrictions have been loosened a bit, so people are allowed to have takeouts. So I'm not sure if you're a big takeout fan, but if you are, even if you aren't, what is the one thing that you are excited to eat again?
It has to be chicken licken. It has to be. but unfortunately, in my area where I'm based now, my overeat does not recognize any chicken licken around. So I've been trying to get a delivery where I'll be able to get the chicken licken. But yeah, I'm still struggling. But hopefully I'll eventually get a delivery which can have chicken licken around my area.
Chicken licken. So you also like them little spicy wings as well.
Yeah. I feed my craving. That's what I always buy every day. I don't think I go a week without buying that.
Serious? So how have you survived this 40 days and counting?
Well, other than working, I've been working a lot. It's a university I have to teach, and I have to write publication. I have to look at master's thesis. But I've been keeping myself busy with cartoons. I love Phineas and Ferb, so I've always been chilling and watching and so forth.
Okay, that's great. That's a great way to relax. I love Phineas and Ferb too. I pretend to watch it with my sister, but deep down I know. But anyway,
one of the best cartoons ever made.
Hands down. Back to you. You've mentioned that you are a lecturer and a researcher, but before you got there, can you just give us an overview of your educational background, and also just what are some of the influences that led you to where you currently now in your career path?
Well, as I've mentioned, from Lamontville, it's a very small town. Well, most people know it because we have a soccer team called Lamontville Golden Arrows. Everybody knows it. We have a soccer team called Lamontville Golden Arrows in the Premier Soccer League, so everybody should know it. If you do not know the place, Pepso Dumo come from there, which is a place called Lamontville. So that's where I was raised, and that's where I did primary school and secondary school. Then I attended Lamontville High School. So from my whole childhood, I was in Lamontville. That's where I started everything. That's where I kickstarted my career. Going back to the question of what led me to where I am now. Well, like I've mentioned, Lamontville is one of the places where there's high poverty, if I were to put it that way. There's nothing much happening there. So with my school, our teachers used to do a program where we can go and integrate with other schools near us. We'll go to schools which, that time we used to call it Model 6 schools, private schools. So we'll go there, visit those schools, do debates with them, do science quiz with them, do science experiment, just integrate with them so we can understand their culture. So that's why I fell in love with education. Then I realized that, I want to be involved in education so I can, represent something. Because when I looked at my high school, there was no one that I know of who studied until to the master's level or to the PhD level. But when we visit those schools, you'll find their alumni coming back and say they used to study here, now they're doctors, they have PhDs. Then I took it upon myself that, I want to be that person. When I visit my own school in Lamontville, I can say, I've studied this far. This is what I'm doing now. So I can inspire all of the students who are at that particular school at that particular time.
That's fantastic. That's really great. And it seems like you have reached that feat. And you are,
No, well, I was about to say, that is true and it's not really true because I still have ambitions going forward. But yes, I have reached the first step of going forward.
Okay. So, as I was saying that, you've reached that feat because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the youngest researcher in your department at the University of Johannesburg here in South Africa. In your department, which is an amazing feat, and like you said, now you can go back to your back to your old school and be an alumni with a doctorate and say, look at me, at my young age, I've made it. So can you tell us, before we talk about what you're currently doing, just the journey from your undergrad all the way up until your PhD, what exactly did you study? And, just to give us a better understanding of what you are and what your interests are before we find out what you're doing right now.
Okay, no problem. Thanks a lot. Like you've mentioned, yes, I am one of the youngest researchers and lecturers in my department currently at the University of Johannesburg. And the same university, it's where I started my undergraduate. That was in 2007 when I started my diploma in analytical chemistry, which I was able to pass in record time. After that, analytical chemistry has to do with looking at nature and looking at environmental analysis and taking them and bringing them in the lab and looking at different species which affects that environment. Take for example, water treatment. So as analytical chemistry, we'll be able to be given that a water which is dirty or water which is not fit for drinking. Then as analytical chemistry, we should be able to determine how we can clean it and what elements are present in that water. So that's what more or less what analytical chemistry involved in terms of undergraduate. Then after my diploma, I was able to do BTech in Pretoria, University of Technology. Well, from analytical chemistry, I was able to branch to BTech in chemistry. So now I was specializing more on the organic side of chemistry.
Okay.
Yes, so when we talk of organic, we talk about being able to synthesize new material from scratch. It can be any kind of material. When you look at pharmaceutical companies, that's what they do. They go and look at nature and come with everything that is in nature in terms of medicinal stuff. Then they'll be able to synthesize it straight from the lab. So that's what organic chemistry taught me when I went to the BTech. Then after that, I decided, you know what, I want to do my master's. So I went back again to the University of Johannesburg, where I was able to do master's in water treatment and rainwater treatment. Basically, in that I was looking at how can I purify wastewater using different type of membrane, which I was making them myself in the lab.
Okay.
After that, in the same university, when I started my PhD, I was offered a position within the department since they already knew me from my undergraduate, and during that time in my undergraduate, I had been elected as a tutor and demonstrator, so they already knew me very well. So then I was able to enroll for PhD while being employed at the university. So that's my journey from my undergraduate until to the PhD level.
Okay, fantastic. So with what you've said, you've had a heavy chemistry background, although it's in different elements, but it's been the center of most of your studies. So right now, what are you currently working on, and what is the importance of that research as a researcher? And also, I know you also have your own research group.
Well, me and my students, basically my research group is based on the continuation of the work which I was doing as part of my PhD. My PhD was in collaboration with the University of Johannesburg and the CSIR. So I decided to continue that type of research group, but obviously venture to different ways I can apply that PhD. So now me and my students, we're working on developing new types of power sources. If you think of a battery, for example, you think of how solar produces electricity. So we're trying to look at different ways which we can come up with power sources. Again, power sources which will be cleaner and friendly to environment. So specifically, we're working on power sources which are called fuel cells and flow batteries. If you talk, for example, of fuel cells, that's specifically working on, if you can imagine your phone, it comes with a battery, which is a lithium battery, but which is a lithium battery. So we're trying to come up with an ethanol or an alcohol fuel cell where it will work like a battery, but instead of charging your phone, you actually have to pour some alcohol in your phone. Then it's recharge itself, which means you don't have to rely on your battery or on the ESCOM that you have currently in South Africa providing electricity. So that's one of the technology we're working on. Another technology we're working on is what we call redox flow batteries. The concept is the same as normal batteries, but now the only difference is that these batteries last longer. If you look at the concept of a battery, it uses acid material which corrode or which last. That's why some people have to change their car batteries now and again. But the batteries that you're working on can last you for a very, very long time without you changing it. So those are kind of energy sources that we are trying to work on.
Interesting. I just want to go back. Oh, sorry. You can go.
Yes, and one of the projects which is close to my heart when it comes to the fuel cell is the one which we call the ethanol fuel cell. Those are kind of fuel cell or batteries which we can use in rural areas. Imagine a rural person or a farmer just finished farming their sugar cane, and they can take the waste from sugar cane and produce ethanol, and they take that ethanol to charge their battery or to charge their fuel cell, which means they can have electricity that is sustainable, and which means that they're self-sufficient and they do not rely on ESCOM or any other sectors which produce energy for them.
Oh, okay, that's great, and that's a great follow-up to my question. How you mentioned that you are the project that's really close to your heart with working with rural areas. We know that energy is an important issue, not only here in South Africa and our energy issues with our energy operator ESCOM, but also globally, right? So as we look for solutions to stabilize our energy sources and move towards cleaner forms of energy, what are your predictions in terms of the implementations of these alternatives that you are currently working on in your research group for the future?
Okay, like I mentioned, we're working on fuel cells, alcohol, we're working on flow batteries, and another thing we work on is what you call PV. which is more like your solar panel. And these projects, all of those projects, are in collaboration with international institutions, which is from Japan, it's from Germany, it's from Sweden, and it's from USA, and it's from Thailand. So you can see that everybody has an interest in this kind of technology because it promises to be technology of the future. And some of this technology have been implemented in different countries. But now, as my research group, we're looking for a technology which is more or less the same, but it is suitable for the conditions in South Africa. Then we can use it. So some of these technology have been used or are currently being used. But again, they are limited by different material or precious material, which we in South Africa, we do have, which means we can use that opportunity of using those minerals for our own benefit in South Africa.
Oh, okay. That's you're right with that. That as much as we can look to see what the international people are doing, we always have to adapt these solutions, if I can say, to problems here at home. And it's good to know that you are working towards that.
That's correct. And just to mention something, this technology overseas, like I've mentioned, your fuel cell, your flow batteries, exist because South Africa exists. They take most of those precious materials from South Africa to develop these technologies, but we don't have people developing the same technology in our own country using this same material. So that's why we decided to venture in that type of research. But these people are taking our materials and developing this type of different batteries and fuel cells, but we don't have companies in South Africa who are doing that. So that will be what me and my research group are trying to look at. Can we develop different types of fuel cells and different types of batteries to help rural areas and remote areas in South Africa to self-sustain in terms of energy?
And also, I think ultimately you can also help the economy in the process, right?
Correct. Remember, at the end of the day, that's the main thing that we need to help the economy. But again, the moment we help people who are at the lowest of the economy, that will also increase our economy structure. So those are people we're trying to help.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's not only a South African issue where minerals are taken from here and are going to be developed in the West or wherever, and then it comes back to us at a very exuberant prices. Meanwhile, nobody's doing it here. So it's really exciting to know that you saw that gap and you saw the need for the work, and it's pretty exciting, and to see how it will be taken up by our governments and to be implemented, especially, like you said, to the most vulnerable people in our communities.
Talking of the government, we actually do have a project which is based in the rural area of KZN, where we're trying to implement one of these technologies. Obviously, I cannot talk in details about it because it's still a work in progress. But we are trying to take some of the research that we've been doing and try to implement there in the rural areas of KZN and see if will it work, will it be sustainable in terms of the condition that we have in South Africa. Then from there we can determine if we can commercialize the technology, or we still need to revamp it and try to make it suit South African weather and South African environment.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to know that you have the government buy-in already, and that there is a process to get this started right now. Because I think sometimes in research, as much as researchers can develop all of these ideas, it's really hard to get policies in place to actually implement these things. So the fact that you are saying that there is government already buying into the idea, that's really exciting for the future prospects.
Yeah, no, it is. You're quite right. It is.
It is. It's very exciting for future prospects. So that was very interesting. But now I'm just gonna come back to you, right?
Okay.
As much as it's really good to know what you're doing, but this is an interview about you as well. So I just want to find out what are some of your achievements to date. You've done, like you said, that you're not where you want to be yet, but you've achieved a lot in your young research career. What do you look at now and you think, I wish younger me would have known that this was actually possible for me to do, when you think about the times when you were back in Lamontville and you were still a student?
Well, looking back, I never thought I would have a PhD, even though I had ambition to get it. So for me, getting a PhD at the age of 28, that was one of the highest achievement I could have never thought of myself doing. So it was really an achievement for me.
Congratulations.
And also, thank you very much. And also being a lecturer in the same department which I studied in, that basically told me that when I work, people do notice your work ethic, because they could only hire me because I was part of the system and they knew what was my work ethic. So that's why they decided to hire me. So that was really a highlight for me to be hired in the same department I was working. But on top of that, one of the biggest things I always tell my students, and I also tell some of my younger brothers and sisters, is that having a PhD have given me an opportunity to be able to go overseas and give scientific talk and be invited to different universities, for free. Recently I was in USA where I was invited for free, where I was able to give scientific talk. I was able to give a lecture to undergraduate students. That was all based on the knowledge I've acquired and also on the ambition that I have. So people now are able to look at me and say, whoa, here's an expert who can come and assist us in this. So that's also one of my achievements that I will say, looking back, I've never thought people will hold me in that high standard, knowing where I come from. And the recent one, which was last year, which I was part of the Melon Garden 200 Young South African under the Science and Technology category. That was also the biggest highlight, because it tells that people actually, without you noticing, there are people who are looking at your progress and there are people who are looking at the work that you are doing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And also within the university, I've been a couple of times nominated for the best lecture in the faculty. So that tells me that, I do all that I can, and form part of my achievement. You imagine being elected as the best lecturer in the university with such an esteemed name, the University of Johannesburg.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and it's really great. I mean, for you to be recognized like that, it means you're doing very important work. And also another thing to state is you're also touching lives and affecting people in a positive way. So I think for you to be recognized in all these avenues, for best lecturer or the Mail and Guardian Award, it means that you are inspiring other people, other Africans in particular, to be like, I want to be like him one day, which is fantastic. And that's why people like you, and talking to people like you is very important. And while we're on that, like we said, that I'm sure you have many pinnacles that you plan to reach and that are not there yet. But what are some of your future ambitions? Because I can just tell right now that you're very driven and you're very passionate about so many things. So can you just let us know about some of your future ambitions?
Well, other than being a researcher and being a lecturer and having a PhD, one of my things that I love the most is being an entrepreneur. So one of the biggest ambition I look forward to the time where all of the research that I do with my students will be commercially available. And actually, our people will be using it in rural areas and remote areas. That will be one of the biggest achievements I've done in my life.
Yeah, definitely. And also I like how you can be an academic, but you can also be an entrepreneur as well. Because, sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between those two fields. Like people think that just because you are in academia, that's all you know. But it's good to know that you also want to incorporate those two things.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good to know. Also, as we are ending this very exciting discussion, I know you've already mentioned it a little bit earlier, but there are some people all over Africa, not only here in South Africa, who are inspiring to get into the STEM field, who might be listening all over the world. What advice would you give to them? And also advice for, the postgrads. Sometimes being a postgrad is hard, and you've been through it. What advice would you give to them as well about life after a PhD or life after a master's degree? Because you are on the other side.
Well, before I go to the postgrad, I would love to start with the people who are in high schools.
Yeah.
Our university has different pillars within toward us as lecturers. One of the pillars is community engagement. So university hold us that we need to do community engagement. So we get a chance to go and visit high schools, primary schools, and do all of the work. And one of the work which I do is help a school in Soweto called Mshugantambo, which I normally help them with their practical to collaborate with the theory, and sometimes help them with their theory class, like teaching and on so forth.
Okay.
What I normally tell them is that the STEM field is a growing field. It has been growing, but people have not been realizing. But now, since we're now in the era of 4IR, we start talking about smart cities. So as an individual who wants to go to STEM, it's all about hardworking, perseverant, vision, and a patient of what you are doing. Because one thing people don't realize is that if you're in a STEM field, some of the things that you do, you cannot realize them today or tomorrow or in the next year. You may realize all the things you're doing in the next 5 years. So if you don't have patience of the STEM field, chances are you are not fit for the STEM field. So that's what you need to have. That's the honest truth about STEM, because people think the moment you have a PhD, you're going to start making money. Well, which is true and which is not true, because it depends which route you take. Talking about the PhD and the postgraduate students, I always tell my students that there's no point for you to do your PhD if you don't have ambition of being an entrepreneur. What's the point of you doing research which you don't have ambition of seeing it live one day, seeing it commercially available one day? So I always tell them, if the work that you do should represent the person who you are and the person you want to leave a legacy. We want to look back after 20 years, 40 years retiring and say, you know what, I work on that work and now I can realize my children are using devices which I'm the one who pioneered them. So those are things people in STEM field need to start understanding, especially in Africa, knowing our standard in Africa in STEM will provide and all of that. So it's up to us as people who are in STEM field to start looking at different solutions for our people, for Africa, for South Africa, if you're in South Africa.
Yeah, that's very true. The word that there's a nice phrase that I heard, and it's something that stuck to me. We need to look for African solutions by Africans, because sometimes we are the only ones who can really understand the problems that we need to solve. So like how you realized it here and how you said that here in South Africa, there's nobody doing what you're currently doing. They take the minerals here in South Africa and they do it overseas, but here you are with the minerals, but nobody's doing it. So you are now doing that, solving the African solution, Africans solving African solutions. So yeah, that's some very solid advice from you. Thank you.
To go back, there are people who are doing the kind of work that I've been doing, but you'll find that those people have been doing that same kind of work for the last 10, 15 years, but they don't have anything to show with it. That tells me that those people are either doing it because it's part of their job, or they are just there because they want to get paid. They are not doing it as part of their passion, because you cannot have about 15, 20 years doing the same thing, but you don't have anything to show off. Okay. So even though we do have people who are working on, we're still not seeing anything in the market. So it's up to us as young people to start realizing that, you know what, we can do this thing ourselves here in Africa and our own people.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's been great hearing about this, and I can't wait until you realize this dream. And like you said, it might not happen right now, maybe in 5-10 years that we're going to see these products in the market, but it will be very exciting to know that I got to interview you in the beginning. I got to interview you in the beginning, and now people are aware that you are doing this, and when it eventually happens, hopefully somebody will remember, be like, oh hey, I listened to that guy and he said this will happen, and it's currently happening.
No, thank you. I really appreciate for you having me tonight. Even though we had technical problems at the beginning, but I really enjoyed the interview. And like I said, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, behind the scenes technical difficulties, but here we are. It was fantastic talking to you.
And these are different type of platforms where we can reach out to everybody to understand what different type of youth in South Africa are working on. That's when we can start doing collaboration, because someone knows that, you know what, I know there's a guy who working this type of work, and I think I have a solution which falls in under that kind of work. So these are kind of work that our youth need to start looking and say, you know what, we need to work on technologies. We need to make Africa an industrial place so that we can actually start solving the problem that our people currently have in South Africa and in Africa.
Yeah, true. I mean, this is why I do what I do. I do it so that we can create these networks. And like you said earlier, you said something important, that we need to, after you've done your research, instead of just publishing your paper, we need to put it out there so that people can actually hear about it. I think that's the most important, the information dissemination. So I'm happy that I've got to do my part, and hopefully somebody hears us and they will collaborate with you and network with you. So yeah.
Thank you.
It's been great. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time. Bye.